Hey folks, it's Duds Fried here, and I'm just gonna hit you with a little bit of tutorial action today. Here's the thing. Seems like you guys enjoy my tutorial videos more than you do my gameplay, which is alright. I'm glad you like something on my channel. No problem with that. But a question I get a lot is, there's about 5 MSI Afterburner videos on this channel. People are real interested in desktop video capture net. I think I put the first one up of MSI Afterburner like 3 years ago or something, and I've done 4 more since then. Those are still popular videos. More popular than anything else I've ever done on my channel. But I gotta say, recently, and recently meaning the last couple of years, I've kind of moved away from that, mostly because I started doing game streaming, which, if you see like the 900 Path of Exile videos on my channel, you kind of know that's what's going on. Well, Afterburner was kind of getting in the way of the gaming, especially if I played things like Battlefront or any other kind of games that were real intensive. It's just the CPU usage got too high, the file sizes got huge. So I was like, well, it's time to do something different, and I really didn't want to start paying a bunch of money to XSplit or anything like that. So I, like a lot of streamers and a lot of people, I found OBS. But I found out that OBS is not just a good streaming platform, it's a great recording platform as well. And I'm actually using it right now. So here's the lowdown. This video is going to show you about OBS, which is Open Broadcaster Software, but it's going to have an emphasis and a premise of using it to record desktop video, gaming, that kind of thing. And I'll give you some little hints and tricks along the way here. I'll try to keep it as short as I can, but I want to give you the information because I see a lot of people, especially I saw this with a buddy of mine, he tried it out and he missed one setting, it just screwed up all his videos. Now, first and foremost, what we're looking at here is the current and supported version of OBS, which is called OBS Studio. There's another version of OBS called OBS Classic. This is the OBS that most people knew and came up on and started using. For the most part, I use OBS Classic because I find I'm used to it, one thing, and it's a little simpler to get around. But OBS Studio is actually the better product because it's got actually more intuitive prompts and more user-friendly interface, as long as you figure out what you're doing. Now, this is going to be amazing, but I can actually have them both running. I'm actually going to open OBS Classic, and here it is. This is OBS Classic. Now, you can still get this from OBS, from the download site online, but it's not supported anymore. It hasn't been updated since last year. But there's a lot of commonality between this, and of course there would be. The OBS isn't going to change things too much. But the same rules are going to go for both. And what I'll do is I'll start in Classic here to show you the settings for recording. Now, before we get there, let me give you some real kind of baby steps here. The first thing you have to understand about OBS or any streaming / recording app is you have to set it up so that you're grabbing what you want to grab. In OBS, there's the concept of a scene and a source. You can have multiple scenes, and scenes can have multiple sources. What's a source? Well, a source can be anything from capturing a desktop window, like say a browser window, like this. Well, that's slow. To your entire monitor, like everything you're seeing here, and everything I may do on it, right clicks and all that good stuff, to even other devices. In OBS, and especially in Classic, it allows you to have multiple sources. So like you've seen me, in fact you saw it when we started this video, the image slideshow, okay? What that is that's the thing that it's going to go out to either a recording or to the stream, if I choose this to be the source of information I want to go out there. I'm not going to set one up here because I don't want to do it here. And it's real simple. I mean, if you want to record, if you want to start streaming, you start streaming. If you want to record, you hit start recording. But before you do any of that, know that first you have to have a scene, then you have to add a source. Now, most common for me is I will add at most 3 sources. And this is not a game, but why not? We'll just do that. We'll just call that a source. It'll either be a monitor capture, a window capture, or a game capture. Now, this is going to go for both OBS Classic and OBS Studio. Game capture is just like it sounds. You start Battlefield 1. Okay. And actually, this is not recommended, and I'll get into that later, but say you start Battlefield 1. So you go to your game capture, double-click it, do your download, and you find your Battlefield 1. Okay. And you just select it, and you say, okay. Put the check in the checkbox, and guess what? That's going to be the source that's either streamed or recorded. All right? And then when I do that, you just click Start Recording. But before you do that, there's some settings you need to look at. In OBS Classic, you hit the settings bar here. This brings up this dialog. Your primary area of concern with recording now, to some extent streaming, but to recording, is to make sure that you have your broadcast settings in Classic set up to actually record a video. And all you have to do that is check this box here, automatically save stream to file. And also, you will have the opportunity here to set up your file path. Where do you want your recording stored? Know this, in OBS Classic, you really only have 2 formats to save in. You can do MP4, which is the default, or FLV. I usually pick FLV because it's more efficient when I'm capturing streams and things like that, and seems to have less of an impact on the machine. Since I don't use a separate video capture machine that's being output to, I do everything on one machine. I'm looking to minimize the load on that machine. And you can do other things like minimize network impact too, which the thing about that is it kind of deprecates OBS, its processes. So your recordings, you may get a little chopped, that kind of thing, but at least it's not going to be getting in the way. Where that's come into play is games like, say, Star Wars Battlefront. One thing I've noticed with OBS is I usually can't stream over a slow connection, which is like anything under 5 megabits upstream. And it also affects recordings, by the way, but I'll have trouble. In Battlefront, I'll actually see a note about how my upstream is too slow. And that's because Battlefront tends to use a lot of upstream bandwidth for some reason. Probably for the voiceover stuff and all that other stuff, but I'm still not convinced the netcode's optimized in the new games, but that's here nor there. Anyway, you would click that if you wanted to try to make sure that OBS didn't get in the way of the game as far as putting too many upstream network packets and stuff like that, just getting in the way of the network itself. Okay, so that's broadcast settings. So this is where you're going to set this here. You're actually going to set your path here. Don't worry about the replay buffer. That's automatically going to get set. That's kind of like NVIDIA's shadow play. Whatever. Okay, your next setting. We're not going to save anything. Watch your settings here. Base resolution, and this is going to come up again in OBS Studio. This is going to be basically your monitor's resolution. And you can set this to anything you want, but if you do, realize that you're going to suffer the effects of it. If you set this to 20, to 4K resolution, and you're outputting to HD, you're going to end up with like what I had remember my quarter screen theaters? That was the direct result because I had the settings set incorrectly, and it just ended up screwing it up. So know that. So pretty much don't mess with this if you're doing records or streams unless you really, really have to. Audio, in Classic, make sure you check whatever microphone you're using. If you're doing like I'm doing, recording a voiceover. Desktop audio device usually defaults fine if it's speakers. If it's not, or you have too many sound sources, just make sure you pick the right source here to go on your video. And then, we'll go back to the encoding. In OBS Classic, you've got two choices. You've got the X264, which is H264 encoding, or if you have an NVIDIA graphics card, you can do the NVIDIA ENC, which is the NVIDIA encoding, which preferable because it takes the load off the CPU for the stream encoding and the record encoding, by the way, and puts it on the actual graphics card if it can handle it and if the driver handles it. What I will say is it works pretty well most of the time, but the NVIDIA encoder will always err on the side of making sure the stream is smooth, which means it'll drop down settings, it'll drop down resolution, it'll drop down, FPS, that kind of thing. So just know that and if you've watched a couple of my stream videos since I've been using the NVIDIA encoder, the streams are smoother. I don't have nearly any dropouts anymore, but what I do have, I've noticed, is sometimes you see that blitting, kind of blocky, anti-aliasing, non-aliasing kind of stuff going on, or that kind of thing. That's because of the NVIDIA encoder. The X264 seems to do a little better job of image quality. The NVIDIA encoder seems to do a better job of stream quality. Now, if you got a super hot rig and a real fast connection, use either one. It's not going to matter. The other thing I mentioned, hotkeys. For example, in this one, this is OBS Classic, I've set the numlock / key to be my stream start and stop. And I've set my asterisk to be the record start and stop. You can say anything you want. You can set different keys. I just use the same to make it easy because then I don't have to remember so many keys. But that's pretty much the settings you're going to have to worry about. So make sure your audio is set right. Make sure your video is where you want it. In this case, if you downscale, you can downscale to 720 or something like that, but make sure that the video looks right in the preview mode. And I'll show you back here what that is. If we do a preview on the stream, you see this is your preview. All right. If we did, I can do edit scene and it gives you little grab bars. If your video looks something like that, okay, you know something went wrong. You got it screwed up, and that's what your stream viewers are going to see, and that's what your recording is going to look like. So just kind of be aware that settings do make a difference, and it's kind of good to take a look at the preview, see what's going on. And in OBS Classic, all you do is hit edit scene, and it'll give you those grab bars, and that works for recording or streaming. So now, that said, that's OBS Classic. File sizes, stuff like that. FLV tends to be pretty small. MP4 tends to be kind of large. And depending on whether, if it's 30 or 60 frames per second, depending on how much activity is going on the screen. For stuff like this, like a desktop, capture, just me sitting there looking at an app on the desktop, this file size is going to be virtually nothing. Now, if I had Battlefront going on or something like that, and a lot of action, a lot of changes, a lot of frames going on, the file size would be huge, regardless. I mean, huge in relative terms. We're talking 2-3 gigabytes in size, for the average, say, 30-minute video. So be aware of that. Now, we looked enough at OBS Classic. Let's take a look at what we're actually using now. OBS Studio. Now, remember I said that a lot of the settings you're going to be concerned about were going to be basically in like a stream setting, a broadcast setting, that kind of thing in OBS Classic. They've simplified that language here. And the comparable settings that we have to worry about for recording are going to be primarily in output. And you see that in OBS Studio, they've actually split now and put a stress on actually making it easier to set up your recording settings. You see streamings here, recordings here. We have the same thing here. We set our path, recording path. We have the recording quality, which is a new thing, and it kind of that's intuitive too. You have high, low, exactly as it is. That's all going to affect, the hits on the encoder, the hits on your CPU, how big the file size is. That's where that's set here. Recording format, they have more formats in OBS Studio. They have FLV, MP4, MKV, MOV, and a couple of other strange little formats. So you got more formats to choose from. And here, see, instead of having have it in stream, the output, they've moved the encoder settings. Here you can be hardware or you can be H.264, and there's one other you can choose. So that's kind of that there. Then there's also custom mux settings you could do, but I generally don't use them, and you probably won't either. Audio, that's the other thing I'll go over. Remember, now OBS is a little simpler when picking audio devices and things like that, but in this case, it's got a lot more options here because you can have multiple devices. Now, default is usually whatever you work. Like in my case, default is the microphone I'm talking to you on now. This is the audio. I'm sorry. Let's go to the mic, actual mic. There we go. The mic is the actual mic I'm talking to you now. Desktop audio device. This is where the audio from the game or whatever's going on desktop is going to be captured. And the default is for me is just going to be the speakers, that's fine. That works. This is where you set that. Video, right here. This is the one place most people screw up in OBS Studio. This is where you get the quarter screen theaters and stuff like that. Okay, because here's what happens. They say, okay, well, what's my base resolution, which is your output resolution? Well, in my case, I'm doing HD, 1920 by 1080. What's your output resolution is 720p, 1280 by 720. And you're like, well, I should just make that the same, as my output. My output should be the same as my base. Well, normally, yes, except that you have to take into account that it's a scaled resolution. It's not going to be 1920 by 1080 is 1920 by 1080. It's going to be scaled up, and your record may be blown out or oversized. It'll look wrong. You'll get the quarter screen theater like I was talking about. So basically, this is optimized for 720p, which is usually the best quality for the lowest network impact and the best stream quality. You can change that, but if you change it, so it's basically not scaled, keep an eye on this window here, your preview window, and always make sure your preview window is visible. But make sure that you can actually see your full desktop and you're not getting just a partial desktop. And before we leave I don't bother with downscale. You can do whatever you want with the samples. Just know that the more samples you use, the more hits on the CPU, and the more hits on, or the bigger the file size. And the last one, your FPS. I leave it at 60. 720p at 60 frames per second looks pretty good for most things you're going to do on YouTube or Twitch or whatever. So, and again, hotkeys. And this has even more hotkeys you can set. Okay? I generally, again, set the same hotkey for starting and stopping, for recording and streaming. And this is basically where you set it in OBS Studio. Advanced, I generally don't mess with too much for what I do. But so your primary changes for recording, if we're focusing on recording this video, okay, are going to be output, your audio settings, and making sure you don't mess up your video settings, then setting your hotkeys. That's going to be your primary thing. Now, remember I said something about you could screw up your video? Okay. Like that. See how I suddenly it's like, oh, it's oversized. It looks terrible. What happened? Okay, that's the kind of thing that you can have happen if you set your scale and your canvas size the same. Or say you set your canvas size to 4K and your scale size to 2K, or HD, and you end up with, an output on the screen that, looks something like, looks like that. Okay? Be conscious of that. This is why preview is your friend. Figure out what's wrong before you start streaming. Make sure. Do a couple of test streams. That kind of thing. Thing about OBS Studio is that pretty much, unless you tell it not to, it's always going to preview. See, I could turn it off. I could turn it on. Okay, all you gotta do is right click on there and just check that checkbox. Now, let's go into some other things about OBS. Same concept, scenes and sources. I can have multiple scenes. I can have and scenes could have multiple sources. Like, say, I just want you to look at my slideshow again. All I got to do is change the scene. I'll go back here, and now we're back to my desktop. I can add sources. So let's say I want to add, and I have many more sources to add here, by the way. Say I want to add a browser source. Okay, we'll do that. We'll add a browser source, and here we can check it, and we'll just say, okay, I want to add a browser source. And now it's there, and I have it in my stream, and you're seeing it move around here. Okay, I can turn on and turn off sources. I can turn off the browser source and turn on the Windows source. Or I can turn off the Windows source and turn off display capture, and wow, now you see nothing. Or you could see just the browser source. And this is typical. If you've watched people stream and they seem to have multiple screens going on, this is kind of the cheat they do. You can do this here and say I do display capture and I decide I want to resize that. Okay, I can do that too. I can grab bar, and now let's just get this like that. And I'll do a window capture, and let's find a window to capture. Let's open Firefox and go back to OBS, and we'll say yes, that's the one I want. And now I've got a window capture, and I just happen to pick a Firefox browser. And see, people do this all the time. You drag and drop as you please. You can turn them on and off. This little eye here. Okay, I'm going to turn off display capture. Oh, now all you see is OBS and my desktop. Now I'm going to turn it back on, turn off window capture, turn off browser source. And now I'm back to my desktop, and I could resize that and get that in there. Just be aware, just like you're seeing on the screen now, that's what your recording's going to look like. That's what your stream's going to look like. Okay, keep that in mind. So that's why I say preview is your friend. And that's pretty much it. I mean, and again, say you wanted to record, and remember, streaming and recording is so closely related in OBS that a lot of this stuff crosses over. Remember I showed you the video capture device in OBS Classic? Well, you could do it here too. And you'd set it up, and all you'd have to do is find the hardware, and you put your settings in here, configure the video, configure crossbar, whatever you wanted to do. And that would let you use another machine to capture raw output from your gaming rig or your Xbox or PS4, whatever you're doing. And that would just work. So there you go. Anyway, let's see. Is there anything else to tell you about recording? Really nothing else. I mean, they all work the same. You see here, you got the mixer, you got the line levels here, and this is pretty good because this lets you know, like this little bar is letting you know that I'm actually talking. I actually have a level. If you're talking on your mic and you don't see anything on this bar on your mic, then, well, nobody's hearing you. We're going to go ahead and turn off the video capture device too. We don't need that. And you see that these bars and these sound monitors come on and off as you turn on and off things that it can actually use them, like see the browser source and the window capture will. But yeah, stuff will just turn on and off as you use it. Anyway, that's really all there is to it, guys. You know, the same thing, start and stop recording. You can actually set in settings when you're doing the stream. Let's see, stream key service. There should be an automatic setting. Yeah, you should automatically be able to record when you start streaming. In fact, I think that's the default. Let me take a look here for you. That's the one thing I didn't check. So, yes, right there in general, automatically record when streaming. You check that box the minute you stream in OBS Studio, it's going to record the output for you. So, all right, so that's kind of the tutorial. I hope I didn't confuse you or lose you. Go back through the video, look at things. I've tried to show you what's going on as far as, you know, clicking the buttons and all that good stuff. Questions, comments, hate mail, put it below. Thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful to you. Y'all have a great day. And watch me stop the recording like this.